is David, and I'll be taking us through this session. So, in our last tutorial, we looked at how to install, and we installed Django successfully. We had this page. We're equally able to access our admin page, or admin application in Django. So, today's focus is going to be put across changing this interface. So, we have something custom displayed, which will be coming from a view of our REST framework that we're going to be developing, or our REST API application going to be developed during this tutorial. So we shall be opening up our project X inside VS Code. Again, VS Code is simply a code editor. You can use any editor of preference. So my preference is VS Code. Okay. Now, when you create your application or you create your project, you'll have these files in there. So we have our requirements file that we created using the pip freeze command, and it has all the items our project is dependent on, or the packages. Then we have the virtual environment, which is our isolation of Python for this project. And we have the actual project itself that has the application and our project settings. So when we expand API, we have multiple other things there. We have the init.py file, we have the asgi.py file, the settings.py file, URLs, and so on. So all these have content. For instance, if we start with this asgi.py file. So in Django, the asgi and the wsgi.py files are entry points for handling web requests, enabling our applications to communicate with web servers. So these serve distinct purposes based on the type of the server protocol that is being used. For instance, if we look at the wsgi.py file, so this basically stands for the web server gateway interface. Yeah? And its purpose is providing an entry point for WSGI compatible web servers. For example, we have things like Gunicon, the UWSGI, which are basically used to serve your application in a synchronous manner. So the difference here is going to be either synchronous or asynchronous for those particular two files. So when you jump into the ASGI.py file, now this stands for Asynchronous Server Gateway Interface. So the file is the entry point for ASGI compatible servers. For example, things like Daphne, UVCon, and these are used to serve Django applications, supporting both synchronous and asynchronous requests in there. Then we have the settings file. Now this settings file has settings about our project, installed apps, the middleware being used, the templates basically the entry point for this, the databases we are using, validators, and so on. Then the URLs. This has our project URLs, inclusive of all URLs in different applications. And these are loaded inside your settings. I think you saw this point that has our URL configurations. So whatever you want to be available as an endpoint resource should be configured inside the urls.py file. So let's put our focus back to the settings. We are going to be making some modifications in this file so that we are able to change this interface and have a custom layout of our application. So back here, we shall come to our allowed hosts. So we can allow all hosts here. Say that we allow all hosts. star signifying all. So we leave our debug to true because ideally we're in development and you want to be able to view all different errors happening so we can be able to resolve them. The secret key is auto-generated and this can be modified. However, always keep this safe during production, just as you can see there. Base directory is basically pointing to this is giving us a path to our project so that you can always simply start from the current point where you are and specify any other parts of the files inside. So installed apps, this shows what applications we are going to be installing. So by default, it has the admin, the auth, the content types, session, messages, and static files. So additional to what we have, we are also going to add on our application that we created and call this a default. Then we can also add on the REST framework itself. Add here REST framework. So for now, middleware, we shall leave it untouched. We shall leave that untouched. Can leave all those for now untouched. We shall be getting back to them later on. So our time zone here. So modify this based on the time zone where you are so that you keep track of the right time. So apparently I'm in Uganda and Kampala. So I'll specify a time zone for my region. So this is going to be Africa/Kampala. You can look at Django time zones and pick out one matching where you currently are. Then we have our static files. So static files, again, these are CSS files, JavaScript files, and images. So given the fact that our project is API based, ideally we don't need specification of things like JavaScript, but then we need the CSS and maybe the images. But again, you can still configure all these. So a URL specifies a path that enables us to access a given resource. So obviously, since we have a URL, then we need a folder that is going to hold the different items we'll be accessing through the URL or through the path. So we come and create here a static root. Static root. And the roots don't have a slash. It's just basically the name. And you can already specify that it's a base directory slash the static. So starting from the base directory where you are, that is going to be basically the API, the project X folder. Then you specify how to access that project X and the API. Then we come to the media. We should also configure our media URL. So this is going to be media. Then we come and specify the media root. So the media root, again, this is going to be our base directory slash our media. So media files, these are basically files users will keep uploading to the system over time. So these change. So equally tell Django on how to access media files on your application or your project. Again, the base directory is basically a path pointing to our project. So we're done with the settings file, so we can navigate to the URLs file. So inside the URLs file, our interest is going to be making all these available so somebody can access static files and media files, and equally registering the URLs for the default application that we created. So we're going to be importing include, so we're able to include application URLs to our overall URL patterns. Then we need to import settings and static from Django. So in here we shall come and say from Django.configuration we need to import the settings, and equally we need to import static. So this is found in Django.conf django.urls.static. So from django.configuration.urls.static, we shall import static. So having imported those, we need to add them to our overall URL patterns. So I'll come and say here plus static, open my bracket, come and specify the media URL and the media root, and equally the same thing for the static URL and static root. So I'll say this is settings dot the media URL, comma, the document root. Document root is going to be a settings dot the media root. So these spellings should be the exact spellings you specified inside the settings file. Other than that, your application will crash. Then I need to also add on the static. So I'll add this and I'll change this to static and static. So now this file is ready for consumption. However, I've not yet added the path for my default application that I created. So I'll come and add it here as well. So a path, I'll open bracket, and I'll specify that to match the entry for my app. Then I'll say include, then the name of the application, default dot the URLs. So by default, whenever you create an application, you don't have the URLs file created. So we have to manually create that by ourselves. So I'll come back to now the application and I'll expand it. So inside here, you'll find migrations, admin.py, the apps, and so on. So we shall be going through all these files over time and seeing what is entailed in each of them. Now, I can click on modules, apps, or admin. My interest is to have a file created in here, and that file should be called urls.py that we're including in this other application. So I'll come and create on a new file and I'll create that file. So the urls.py, and inside here I should create valid URL patterns. So I'm picking a leaf from the URLs file for admin, for the project itself, and I'm just modifying it a bit so I have valid patterns inside here. So we have from Django.urls import path, and then we have URL patterns matching nothing. Now Django is an MVT, so we have models, we have views, and we have templates. The models are essentially the database tables. The views specify the logic for use within this application, and the templates are the HTML files. So given the fact that we now have our URLs, we need to have a valid view that we are going to match to the entry. The entry being basically when somebody accesses your domain name or this localhost at port 8000, so that they're able to see something customer than seeing the installation worked successfully. So we shall come to our views file. Remember, the views has the logic for our application, and we're going to be using REST framework. So we shall need to import certain things from REST framework. To be specific, we need a response, we need the API view decorator, we need a status. So I'll perform those import statements. From REST framework dot decorators, we shall import API view. Then from REST framework we shall import status. Then from REST framework Then dot response, we shall import a response. So we need a response to specify the data we are returning and the status codes for them. We need a status to specify the different status codes. For example, is it a 200? Is it a 404? Is it a 503? And lastly, our API decorator. So I'll be working with function-based views. Again, you can do function-based, you can use class-based. So my focus is going to be around function-based views. So we come and call our decorator. So at API view, then you specify the method for access of that particular function you're going to be creating. So this is going to be using a get method. Then I'll say definition, my home view. So this expects a request as an argument there. Then I'll specify the data to return. So I'll say my data is going to be a simple message. And I'll say hello, hello there. Successfully change the page content. You have successfully, actually that's much better. You have successfully changed the page content. So this is a Python dictionary, which ideally we need to serialize. So return it as a JSON response or a JSON string. So all functions have to return something at the end of execution. So this is going to be returning a response. So I'll come and say return a response. Then I specify the data I'm returning. So this is going to be the data I created. Then what status? What status? So you attach the status code. So this is going to be a status.ok. That means it was successfully processed. So now we have a valid view or a valid function here, and we should map this to a given endpoint. So we navigate back to the URLs file. So inside here, we need to import the views. So we have the different functions inside our view. So I'll come and say from the current folder, import views. Now I'm going to map this empty endpoint to a given view. So I'll say my view is going to be a views dot the home view. Then I can give it a name. I'll say this is a home view again. Now we have a valid pattern pointing correctly to a valid view that we have here. So our interest is to ensure that our server is still running. It never crashed, so our server crashed. We can rerun our server. So it's telling us there is something with the media URL. So let's look back to our settings file. So the media URL should always end with a slash. So sorry for that error there. So back to our code. This should now be running correctly. So you can see the error is now resolved, and our server is using is fired on. So come and refresh this page, see whether we now have a custom display, and there we have it. So this is our home view, and we have the custom message that we're returning from our function. So with that, we have our very first REST API endpoint created. That is simply returning for us an object having a message, and the content of the message is hello there. You successfully change the page content. Okay, so that has been the essence for this particular session, and Stay blessed.